the obstacle for me was too many different types of clients. I never got into any kind of rhythm. I never was able to easily transition from one type of company to another. So I realized that for my own sake, I needed to specialize and find a niche.
You're listening to The Successful Bookkeeper with your host, Michael Palmer. Listen each week as inspiring guests share their secrets of success to help you increase your confidence, work smarter, and build a business you love. This episode of The Successful Bookkeeper is brought to you by PureBookkeeping.com, the proven system to grow your bookkeeping business.
Welcome back to The Successful Bookkeeper. I'm your host, Michael Palmer, and I have a special treat for you. You're about to listen to part one of a two-part interview with Michael Alliman, who is the owner of Alliman Business Group and Reconcile Bookkeeping and Business Solutions. In this episode, you'll hear his inspiring story of how he overcame some struggles, including how he has managed to make his ADHD a superpower when it comes to his bookkeeping work. It's an uplifting conversation. Here it is now. I hope you enjoy it. Michael Alliman, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Michael. It's very, very exciting, and I'm glad to be here.
Well, the honor is all ours. And Michael, I'm looking forward to our conversation. But before we get into things, please tell our listener a little bit about you and your career journey leading up to this point.
Oh, sure. Thank you. So my career journey for what we were interested in started in 1986 when I graduated from the University of Tennessee, Knoxville, with a master's in accounting, emphasis in tax. Thought that I was going to be a tax accountant. Actually, I thought I was going to be a professor, but life kind of interrupted that. My then wife wanted to have a break from me being in school all the time and wanted to complete her education. So we made a deal that I would stop my schooling. I'd use my degree, and having passed the CPA exam, I'd go to work for a few years while she finished her degree, and then I was going to go back to college and finish my PhD so that I could teach. And like I said, that got interrupted. So I went to work for Price Waterhouse, which is what it was still called back then. There were still Big 8 firms when I graduated. I went to Price Waterhouse for a couple of years, was miserable as a public accountant, but thought it was Price Waterhouse's fault. So I switched to what was then called Deloitte Haskins and Sells, and I was there for about a year and a half and realized that the problem was me, not them. And after that, was hired into industry and spent the next 20 or so years in high-speed food manufacturing. So if you've ever had a salad in a bag, that was what I was doing back then, is perfecting that process so that we could cut vegetables across the country, and actually have it arrive on the other side of the country still in good enough shape to eat. After that segment of my life ended. The last two companies I worked for were sold to bigger companies, and I after being tired of building up a company only to have it sold, I decided just to go to work for myself. I started doing consulting in manufacturing, especially in food and other high speed manufacturing, and ended up, long story, but ended up consulting with the federal government for a year, and then went full on in 2010 with a consulting firm. At that time, I was doing bookkeeping, kind of CFO for rent, and bought half interest in a human resources consulting firm, which we combined into sort of, the vision was to, be a one-stop shop for your financials and your human resources stuff, but eventually just turned that all into bookkeeping. And then in 2018, I decided to focus specifically on a niche and did some exploration and ended up in real estate after talking to some representatives from Keller Williams Real Estate is where I first got the idea, because I was talking to some of their coaches within Keller Williams, and those coaches were mostly frustrated that their clients, which were the agents and brokers, those clients didn't have any kind of P&L, or if they did, it wasn't in the format that was suggested by Keller Williams. And so doing comparisons from one company to another was impossible. And so I thought, well, this looks like a niche that needs help. It requires a completely different chart of accounts than the normal standard package that comes with your accounting program, and implemented that, focused just strictly on Keller Williams agents and teams for the first year and a half, and built it into a business actually much faster and bigger than I had anticipated. Brought on a partner who she and I now are the two employees of the company, and we have a pretty well thriving business that pays us both and has some left over every year. So we're excited.
Good for you. What a journey. I always love hearing. I guess that's why I asked the question in every single episode. I always love hearing the lead up to what you're doing today, and what an interesting journey you've had in business, not just in business, but government and the accounting side, the consulting side. I mean, just that alone is such an asset for your clients, I'm sure, to be able to have you as someone that's helping them and guiding them through their business journey.
Yeah, it's funny you say that, because that was one of the things that I intended. When I started this company, I wanted to do two things. I wanted to, first of all, create a company that I'd like to work for. But the other thing was to use the skills that either I was born with or that I learned over the years to help other small businesses grow into larger businesses. And we do that with the tagline. I don't know if you looked at my website, but the tagline is "Making Business Make Sense." Because what I have found, especially in real estate, the very successful real estate agents are great salespeople. And what I've also learned in my career is that great salespeople are not usually particularly detail oriented, especially when it comes to things like their finances, because it's not part of their makeup. And the same way that I can't be great at sales, and therefore I use a real estate agent when I buy or sell homes. That's kind of my marketing to my clients is, I'm not the expert in real estate. That's why I hire you. It doesn't make any sense for me to learn it just to buy a house, as it doesn't make any sense for you to learn accounting to get your numbers in order. So that's really what we try to do. We're very relational, and so we aren't a churn and burn financial group that requires you to use a certain format in order to work with us. We're very flexible. So we don't want our clients to have to change the way they do business to work with us.
Mm.
It took a lot of experimentation, a lot of different software applications before we finally settled on the things, our tech stack that helps us to be super efficient, which is the only way we can get this done. Since there's only two of us and we close 83, I think, clients each month with a full set of financials and whatnot. So efficiency is really important for us as well.
Wow. That's lovely and remarkable. It sounds like a really great business that you've developed in the niche aspect. I think we'll talk a bit more about that, some of the benefits
Sure.
that you've gotten there. But I just wanted to point out, you did also do a webinar for us with the Live Flow, brought to you by Live Flow, and you talked about how automation can increase your value and raise your rates, which for our listener, if you want to go back and watch that replay, you can do that. Just go to the link will be in the show notes, but you can always go to thesuccessfulbookkeeper.com/events, and you can find that replay by Michael there. And it was well received, really well received. So very cool. Now, long journey along building up to your business. I love hearing some of it. When you were starting your bookkeeping business at that stage, what were some of the obstacles you faced?
Oh gosh. Well, one of the obstacles that I realized when I really focused and created the Reconcile solutions that is our bookkeeping division, for lack of a better way to say it. I realized a couple of things. Number one, I had several clients. I was doing a couple of different coffee shops, a restaurant, a veterinarian books, and I realized that there's no way to scale, that I had to find a niche in order to grow a business. And I say that with all the respect due to companies that have several different types of clients. But for the way my brain works, and as I mentioned to David when we first started talking about this, your partner there, one thing that I had to overcome was that was diagnosed late in life with ADHD and issued medication for it because it was painfully obvious that I had the attention span of a 3-year-old, which is not helpful in business. To be able to stay focused was almost impossible for me. And so when I finally got the diagnosis and started treating it as a real thing, I realized that no amount of medication can actually help me. It can help me, but it won't cure me. And so I've had to rearrange my life as far as how to be able to get things done. If you could see my office right now, I have whiteboard paper that I bought from Amazon that you can just stick on a wall, and it's everywhere around me. It's got a list of what I got to do today. It's got a list of what's got to be done this week. On another wall, I've got sticky notes all over the place, and then I live by my alarms on my phone. So this, for example, this interview, I had to put it in my phone to go off 10 minutes before, have an alarm go off to make sure that I realized what time of day it was. And the fact is that I had something coming up in 10 minutes. And it sounds crazy to people that I describe it to, but what I had to realize is that ADHD is not something that you get fixed. It's something that you have to learn to live with. And once I did that, I realized that in order for my brain to work this way, the best thing that I could do is pick a niche and just go after it. So you asked me about obstacles. The obstacle for me was too many different types of clients. I never got into any kind of rhythm. I never was able to easily transition from one type of company to another. So I realized that for my own sake, I needed to specialize and find a niche. And so that was the first big obstacle. The second one, of course, was figuring out a way to make all this scale, because it was great when it was just me and I had 15, 18 clients that I was able to get to know pretty well. But in order to make this scale into a viable business that would not only pay me, but also pay employees, I was going to have to figure out a way to make it grow. And so my second biggest hurdle was efficiency. We had to find products that helped us gain efficiency. And so we went on a search and finally settled on a couple. You mentioned live flow. That was our biggest capacity gain, as how we measure it. So if we can find things that give us back time, that increases our capacity for new clients. That one. And then before that, we use a product called ClickUp that is just an organization tool that helps us transfer data back and forth to each other. Because we're in real estate, we're very document driven. And because we're in real estate, most of my clients are millennials or younger. And so they operate differently. They are rarely at a desk with a computer on it. Most of what they do comes off their phone. And so rather than asking my clients to download and save into a folder the important documents that we need, I realized I needed to let them just email them to me as they got them, which is completely inefficient unless you have a program that you can quickly and easily share emails and associated documents. And we found that in ClickUp. My partner, by the way, is in Florida and I'm in California, so we're rarely in the same place at the same time. So communication efficiency was critical.
When it comes to your ADHD, how did you get diagnosed as ADHD? Did that show up in your business or your life?
It showed up in both business and life. So I essentially changed jobs about every 2 years for a long time. And actually it looked like success because I would get recruited from one company to another. As I told you, we were in the I was in the produce business for a long time in the high-speed manufacturing the side of it, and there was just so few of us at that time when we finally got that product available where we could ship it. There were so few of us that had any experience that I kept getting recruited from one company to another to either fix their company or help them start a processing company, things like that. So I considered it a success. What I realized after, it's all in hindsight now. I managed my ADHD with alcohol, and finally in 2007 went and got some medical help. Well, you asked me about the diagnosis. I actually took my son to a psychiatrist because he was failing in school, even though he's a smart kid, and he was diagnosed ADHD, which I laughed at because I said, this kid isn't hyperactive at all. And that's when I was explained to me that has really nothing to do with the physical behavior, that it's mental behavior. And at the end of that, the doctor looked at me and he said, and he gets it from you. You have all the same tendencies. And I was just shocked. I didn't know what it all meant. But my son got medication and went from failing out of math to the math student of the year,
Wow.
where he was going to high school. And so now fast forward about a year, and I had reached the end of my drinking career, was the best way to say it, and got help. I've been sober for a little over 15 years now. But what I discovered, and when I put down the drink, is that was masking all these issues that I had with ADHD and things like that. So I was basically medicating myself. And when I no longer was drinking, all of that came rushing to the forefront. So all the ADHD, and there's a little OCD in there and stuff like that, that suddenly I didn't have any means to manage because I wasn't drinking any longer. So I got into therapy. I got the medications, the Adderall, whatever it is, which helps a lot. It helps. The way I explain it is, when without medication, my inside my head feels like every file folder that I have, physical file folder, is open on my desk and all the papers are spilling out. And with the medication, it brings organization to my brain. So it's like I put all those loose papers into a folder, hang the folder up in the drawer. That's what it feels like inside. But it doesn't change the fact that I still have problems with focus and concentration and whatnot. So that's kind of a long answer to your question. But I was officially diagnosed in late 2005. I did something about it in early 2007. And then since then, I've been reading and picking up tricks and tips, and I belong to a couple of communities, ADHD. I always call it the survivors community, although it's not. But one of the best things that happened to me is a retired Buddhist monk and I were talking once, and I explained to him about the ADHD. And he said, you need to stop treating that as an enemy. It's not. It just means that you see things differently than other people, and we need that input. He says it's more like turn the HD into high definition. That's really what you're doing. You see things really, really clearly when you're really, really focused. And we like that about you. So don't treat it as an enemy. Figure out how to best work with it so that it can be to your advantage. So that's what I've been doing since then. Hence all the sticky notes and alarms on my phone and whiteboard paper everywhere around me. Otherwise, things just don't exist.
It's fascinating. And so with bookkeeping, you mentioned you bring it into high definition. So it's if it's not on a sticky note, it doesn't exist. It's like
Right.
That's the way your mind is working. And then what does the HD or the ADHD, going back to the high definition analogy there, but where does that give you the advantage when it comes to your business and your bookkeeping? Like the Buddhist monk said, I really love the reframe of, yeah, that's the way you are. It's the way you see the world. It's different, and different is valuable. Where do you see the value, or where is it showing up in your business and in your life?
Well, two places. It shows up in my business because I have the ability to switch from one task to another very easily. The problem is that when I am on a task that I am interested in, so part of ADHD is there's a hyper focus element to it where I have an alarm set on my phone that goes off every day at 3 p.m. just to remind me that it's 3 p.m. because I can sit and do a project nonstop all day and never realize what time it is or anything else. That hyper focus part of it,
Wow.
which is
Wow.
such a blessing when I'm doing really detailed, even forensic type of work. It's beautiful, but I lose track of everything else. Nothing else is coming into my view during that time. So that's a tremendous advantage. It's kind of like a superpower, but I have to remember to turn it off, to not always be living in that hyper focused world or nothing else gets attended to. I don't eat, I forget to have lunch, I forget to drink plenty of water, all those things that I need to do. So I literally have alarm set just to remind me what time it is and make sure that I check in and that I'm nourished and hydrated and all those other kind of things. So that's the advantage. Obviously, the disadvantage is that I have to turn off all of my notifications. So I don't get notifications on my phone except the little blue dot that shows that a text came in or something like that. So because I just follow the lead of the notification. So if I got a
Right.
pop-up that said a new email has come in, I just click on it. And I don't want to do that. I can't, because then I'm on a whole different project and I've forgotten completely where I was before. So
Gotcha. That is so interesting, and you're educating me deeper about ADHD. But that I can see where that you're hyper focused, and if that focus gets triggered to something else, you're just going to end up hyper focused on that other thing, and who knows where you'll end up if you following the breadcrumbs, if you will. But when you're hyper focused, that's it. That's your world.
that's right.
Which in bookkeeping, there's probably a lot of projects where that is really helpful and powerful.
It is, and I have learned to follow my own biorhythms. So, for example, I know that when I sit down at my desk at 7:45 in the morning, I need to spend the next 4 hours doing as much of the detail work as necessary, because that's when I can do that easily. As I get later into the afternoon, I realize that somewhere between 2 and 3, generally speaking, my brain says, okay, enough of that. And now I'm sort of in more of a creative place. And so then that's when I can afford to let myself get into that hyper focus mode. So for example, last night, and I also schedule myself to work after normal hours, so that there's no chance of an interruption. But last night I was working on a client who is new to us, that we had a big rebuild for 2021 and 2022, and their previous accountant, we honestly don't know how they made some of the decisions that they made about what they were doing. So I basically had to tear down and rebuild all of their transactions for 2021 and 2022, which is great. That's when I want that hyper focus to kind of turn on, and so I spent a couple hours last night in complete silence working on that. But again, I had to learn my own rhythms. To try to do creative things first thing in the morning, it just simply doesn't work. And to try to do detailed spreadsheet analysis type of stuff later in the day doesn't work. So I have to find where my brain works best throughout the day. So, and I'm making this sound like more all-encompassing than it is. It's just once you accept the diagnosis and realize that there's ways to work within it by using certain tools and methods and meditation. Meditation is a huge part for me, just to get below the surface of the sea where the waves are crashing and get down below it and realize that, there is a calmness under all this, that I just have to be able to find it. So when I do that, then I have a pretty good day. But I've got a list of everything that I had absolutely needed to get done yesterday. And I haven't done that one for today yet. And I had a very busy day, very successful day, and I only got 3 of the 7 things on my list done, for example. So that's one thing that I also had to learn, was to not punish myself for not accomplishing unrealistic expectations. So
Well, that's definitely a general one. I think many of the guests that I've had, ADHD or not, we're very hard on ourselves. One of the human conditions of overvaluing others, undervaluing ourselves, setting high expectations. Definitely, these are some things that destructive, can be destructive, if not understood. What I really love about your story is your, know thyself.
right.
Every human being is punched out and unique, has their own life journey to uncover, may come with other challenges. You having ADHD, but you've taken all of those things, learned from them, pivoted, and you can just tell in your story a deep research into trying to carve out the best life that you can, and that's inspirational.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And it's a great way to live instead of treating this as an enemy, treat it as a partner and figure out the best way to work with it. So, which is really what anybody has to do in their life. There's nothing special about me. It just makes sense to live that way, I think. But
yeah, and everyone's at different stages. I think the what's special about your story is that you're at the, you can really see that you've made advancements and you've done the work and you've figured it out. And of course, there's lots more to do and figure out along the way. But what I can hear is you've built a successful business despite the challenges or the obstacles that were put in front of you. I think our listener can learn from that, be inspired by that. I certainly am. And so be so interesting to see where you're headed. Amazing stuff. Thank you, Michael. It's inspiring how he's dealt with adversity and stayed in the game on his journey to building a successful bookkeeping business. Get ready for part 2 next week when Michael digs deeper into his real estate bookkeeping business niche. And with that, we wrap another episode of the Successful Bookkeeper Podcast. To learn more about today's guest and to get access to all sorts of valuable free business building resources, you can go to thesuccessfulbookkeeper.com. Until next time, goodbye.
You've been listening to The Successful Bookkeeper with Michael Palmer. For more information and to download the resources mentioned in this episode, please visit us at thesuccessfulbookkeeper.com. Thank you for listening.